Hi class, in this video we're going to go over chapter 23. Now it depends on which book you have. If you have a combined textbook, this is the chapter 23. But if your textbook is by micro or micro only, then this will be chapter 10 in the textbook. Okay, so it's called the Measuring National Income. So this is the first chapter. We're going to see the big picture now. Previously, we looked at the information on the individual consumer, individual business, individual market, but now we're looking at the entire economy, so measuring our national income. Okay, so first, let's talk about our GDP. But before I do that, let's do the review. So if you remember from previously, microeconomics, study of economy on a smaller scale, so individual company, individual consumers, but macroeconomics is economy on the bigger picture here. So information such as inflation, unemployment, economic growth, this affecting entire economy. That's the bigger picture now. So from this chapter on, we'll be only looking at bigger picture of the economy now. So GDP, we all heard this before, GDP. So GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. It measures everything produced in the country. Now, the same with GDP is that if you measure how much you produce, you can also see how much our national income is, because for every dollar spent, that is somebody else's income, right? So if you want to see how much is the national income in the economy, you can just see how much our national expenditure is. So how much do we spend money on, and that will be part of the income. That will be the entire income for everybody in the country. So your expenditure will equal to your income in a closed economy. Now later on in the later chapters, we're going to talk about something called the open economy. That's one is a little different, but for now, just assume that the economy is closed. So you're going to have your total expenditure is equal to your total income. Now next, remember this circular flow diagram. So this was in chapter 2. So you have your market. There are two types of market: the good and service market, the factory production market, and then you have your household. So household, they want to buy goods and services, they want to spend all the money, and also they own the resources. So they own labor, capital, and land. And then firms, on the other hand, they're everything opposite of your household. So they want to produce goods and services, but they're going to hire or purchase resource from the owner of resource, which is the household. So we all seen this before. You can see that there are two directions on this diagram. So the inner circle that shows you the flow of resource in the economy, so how resource flows in the economy. The outer circle shows you how money flows in the economy. So that's why that because these two circles are closed and complete, then your total income for the economy is equal to your total expenditure for the economy. All right, so let's look at our GDP. So GDP, the formal definition is this. This is the formal definition, so very long. So GDP says it's the market value of all final goods and services produced within the country in a given time period. So this definition has a lot of components in it. Now let's look at each one. Okay, so first it says GDP is a market value. That means to be in GDP, to be considered as part of the economy, it must be valued by the market. But if nobody cares about it, nobody even want to buy it, then that won't be part of the economy. So for example, if you guys heard that, a couple of weeks ago, the Banksy just auctioned off his painting for $1.4 million. And then right after the auction was over, the painting started to shred itself, right? So if you guys Google it, just Google the Banksy painting with the girl and the red balloon. You can see the half shredded painting. Don't worry about it, because the guy who bought it, right now, the appraisers, so the expert value that painting is now double the value. Okay, so if Banksy paint a painting that's worth $1.4 million, now if I paint something on the wall, that's called graffiti, and they're gonna paint it over because it's worthless. Okay, so Banksy painting will be part of GDP. My painting is worthless; it's not a part of GDP. And then also, this brings to another point. Your mom, everything your mom does because it's in the household, we don't pay her for it. That is not part of GDP. But because if your mom do the same thing for another family, so let's suppose you want to hire a chauffeur, hire a part-time nurse, hire a part-time psychiatrist, hire part-time, full-time cook, full-time cleaning lady. So that will cost you about $170,000. So if your mom does this for some other family and they pay her, that will be part of GDP. But because in the household, in our own household, we don't pay our mom. Sure, you pay her with love, right? But we all know love is worthless. You can't pay bill with love. So that is not part of GDP. Okay, so GDP got to be market valued. Now, second, GDP is all the item in the market. So everything you produced in the market. Okay, so this is, but however, we're going to exclude, don't need this. We're going to exclude anything that's produced and sold illegally because that we just don't know what's happening. It's impossible to count all the illegal activities in the market. That's why the country of Colombia have the most unreported GDP. Just imagine that if you're the commerce minister of Colombia, you want to see how much your total GDP is for the entire year. Would you call each drug lord, ask them how much cocaine they produced last year? They're not going to tell you that, right? So that's why this GDP does not include anything that's sold illegally or anything consumed and produced at home. So everything your mom does is not GDP. Now, next, GDP is all final good. Now, final good means that this good is now being ready to consume by the end user. So pretty much everything purchased by the household, that's a final good. But if you have a company purchase it and then turn into something else, that will be an intermediate good. Now, for example, let's say that if your company purchase a new truck and use for delivery service, that's an intermediate good because the delivery service, that's the final good. Okay, but if your household purchase it, so our consumer buy the truck for our own use, that's a final good. So GDP only measures final good, not the intermediate good. And the reason why is that if you measure all the intermediate good, there might be a risk of double counting. So imagine you take a piece of paper, right? So you count it once as a paper, and then if a publisher buys this paper again, and then turn the paper into a textbook, you're gonna count it one more time as a textbook. That's double counting because that paper in the book is actually counted twice. So to avoid double counting, we're gonna avoid counting all the intermediate good and only count all the final good. Now, next, GDP is all the good and services. So not just the good you produce, but also the service you're providing for the economy. And that's why for US economies, our economy is about half and half. So half the economy coming from good production, the other half economy coming from service productions. The next one, GDP is everything you produced, not everything you consumed. So there's a difference between them. So let's suppose you produce a car in 2016, but this car is sold in 2017. Now that car will be in your 2016 GDP, not 2017 GDP. So only care about when the car is produced, not when the car is consumed or purchased. Okay. And then GDP must be within the country. So everything produced in the country, regardlessly who produced it. So there's another term you guys might want to know. This might be on your quiz or test. It's called GNP. Now GNP stands for gross national income. Now gross national income, it will show you who produced the good, regardlessly where the good is produced. So GDP is where the good is produced. GNP cares about who produced the good. So for example, if your Ford built a new car in Mexico, that new car in Mexico is Mexico GDP, but because Ford is a US company, that is US GNP. Okay, so again, GNP is who produced the car, GDP is where the car is produced. And lastly, the GDP is measured in a time period. So usually every 3 months or every year, that's when GDP is measured. So GDP, we use this as an indicator of how good the economy is. It's like taking a temperature check. So every time GDP is increasing, that means the economy is doing good. Every time GDP is decreasing, that means the economy is doing bad. Okay, so and again, this is measured either every year or every quarter. So for US economy, we have a new GDP number every quarter. So you can see how good the economy is within 3 months. All right, so GDP has 4 components, and this is a very simple formula for GDP. It's your Y equals to C plus I plus G plus NX. Now Y is denoted as GDP. So Y actually is a lot of things in economics. Later on, you also learn that Y is your income. and then in this case, Y is our GDP. Okay, so Y is GDP equals to your consumption plus investment plus government spending, and then plus net export. So first for consumption, consumption is the biggest component of our GDP. So if you look at our GDP's consumption for US economy, it's about 70% of the overall economy. So this consumption has three components. Their consumption on durable good, non-durable good, and also consumption on services. So difference between durable and non-durable good is 3 years. So anything lasts more than 3 years, that's a durable good. Anything lasts less than 3 years, that's a non-durable good. So any big purchase you have, let's say computers, your cars, your appliances, or furniture, those last more than 3 years, that's durable good. But if you have your grocery stuff, milk, bread, those last less than 3 years, that's called non-durable good. And then services, this would be getting treatment from doctor, getting education, those are all services. Okay, and then also keep in mind that when you buy a new house, that is not consumption. Buying a new house is actually part of investment. Now the reason why the difference between consumption and investment is that for consumption, you use it and then actually depreciate this good. And then once after you use it for certain time, that good will be worthless. That's called consumption. But for investment, so you want to buy a new home, then people will live in the home, but in some years later they can resell this home for a higher price, or hopefully, right? So at least for some return for it. So that's an investment good. Okay, so purchase a new home is not a consumption, but it's investment. Now next, investment component of GDP. So investment is the purchase of goods and services that used to produce more goods and services in the future. So there are three components of investment. So business capital investment. This is one company buying a new truck, buying a new car, buying new equipment. That's a business capital investment. That's the one we think most often about. Okay, and then residential capital. Residential capital, that's that's the purchase of a building of a new home. Okay, so remember we said the buying a house is not a consumption, but it's part of our investment. And lastly is our inventory accumulation. So if anything you produce this year, but you don't sell this year, you're going to sell for next year, that will help you increase your sale for next year. So any type of inventory, that's also investment for the future. Okay, because that will increase your sale for the futures. And next one is our government purchase. So government purchase is the government spending on all goods and services by all level government. So state, local, and federal government. Now this is when the government is buying something. So when they buy a computer, when they buy a truck, when they buy an airplane, and also when they hire employees, those are all government purchase. Now what government purchase does not include, it does not include something called a transfer payment. So transfer payment is any time when the government giving out money for free, that's transfer payment. So for example, your Social Security is transfer payment, your Medicare and Medicaid is transfer payment, because for those recipients, once they get the benefit, they don't have to do anything for return to the government. It's just like free benefit, right? So that's called transfer payment. So transfer payment is not part of government purchase. But when government is actually buying something for return, that's called government purchase. And then next is our net export. Net export is when you use your export minus import. So that's your net export. Now, your consumption is always positive. Investment is always positive. Government purchase is always positive. But for net export, this can be negative. Because for US economy, we have a negative net export. That because our export is more than import. Our import is more than export. So our net export is negative. But if you look at other economies such as China, Vietnam, they're gonna have a positive net export because they have more export than import. Okay, so so this chart over here, as you can see, the biggest component for GDP is consumption, and then for US economy we have a negative net export. All right, so next, know the difference between real and nominal GDP. So GDP has four components, so C plus I plus G plus X. Another way to look at GDP to see how much our GDP is, the simplest form of GDP formula is this. Let me do this. So GDP, roughly speaking, just equal to the price times quantity, that is your GDP. Okay, so whenever your price or quantity change, this might cause a change in GDP. So we have two types of GDP, the nominal GDP and then real GDP. Now, when we say real GDP, I don't mean that there is a fake GDP out there. It's just called real GDP, okay? Every time you hear the term real in this class in economics, it means the actual good. So not the money, but the actual good, okay? So nominal, you're gonna take the price of each year, so the current year prices, times the current year quantity. Real GDP is your price in base year times your current year quantity. Okay, so the difference is that for nominal GDP, both the price and the quantity can change. So if your price change, your nominal GDP will increase. If your quantity change, your nominal GDP will increase. But for our real GDP, the price is base year, so price will never change. It's always fixed, but your quantity is flexible, so quantity will be changing. So with real GDP, if you see a change in real GDP, that means your quantity is changing, not the price. The importance of this is that remember at the very beginning of the chapters, but the beginning of the class, chapter 1, chapter 2, I tell you guys that money is not important, because for every economy, we don't care about how much money you have. We care about how much good you can produce in the economy. So let's suppose the economy for the entire year only produced one book. And then for this one book for this year, so for, let's say for 2017, we're gonna sell the book for $10. Then our GDP is $10, right? And then next year, we still only produce one book. But for next year, we're gonna sell our book for $20. Now, does it mean the economy getting better? Not really, because you still only have one book, right? So we don't care about how much money you have, we care about how much good you can produce. That's why the real GDP is a better measurement of the economy than a nominal GDP. Because nominal, you have a price change built into it, but the real change has only the quantity change into it. Okay, so it's a better measurement of the economy. And that's why we have another term that you guys might have heard this before. It's called the real GDP per capita. That just means real GDP per person. Okay, so with real GDP per capita, you can see just how rich or how poor a country is. So the richer the country is, the higher the real GDP per capita, but the country is pretty poor, they're gonna have very low GDP per capita. Okay, so definitions. So nominal GDP is measured in the current year prices, and then real GDP is measured in the base year price. So the price will never change. The only thing changes is your quantities. All right, we're gonna come back to this one later. Okay, so I will show you a couple more slides before I go back to this one. And the next note was a GDP deflator. So GDP deflator is that because your nominal GDP has both the price and quantity change into it, but the real GDP has only the price change. Only the quantity change into it. So if you compare the two against each other, then the difference between the two will be how much the price will change. So we can actually use these two comparisons to show the price change, and then use the price change to show inflation. Okay, so GDP deflator can be used to show what the inflation is in the economy. So for the deflator formula, write it down for you. So GDP deflator equals to your nominal GDP divided by real GDP times 100. That is your GDP deflator. Okay, so nominal GDP divided by real GDP times 100. That's your GDP deflator. And then next, for inflation, so this is the formula for inflation. So again, inflation is when you have an increase in overall prices in the economy. So inflation formula is your GDP deflator in year 2 minus deflator in year 1 divided by deflator in year 1 times 100. So for inflations, you always compare between 2 years. So this year inflation minus last year, and this year deflator minus last year deflator, and then divided by last year deflator, and that's your inflation for the economy. Okay, so let me show you an example how to do this. Let's suppose our economy produce only 2 goods, only produce apple and banana. You know the price of each apple and the quantity of how many we produce. So price of banana, quantity for banana. I'm gonna do it for 3 years, so 2015, 2016, and 2017. Now guys, when you do a question like this, make sure you read the question carefully, because in the prompt, in the question, it will tell you which year is the base year, because that base year will make a lot of difference when you do calculations. So sometimes base year might be the first year, might be the middle year, might be the last year. So don't assume it's the first year. Read the question carefully. Okay, so let's just say that for this question, our base year is the first year. Now, if you want, can do this at home. You know, try to have a different base year and see what the answer come out. Okay, so let's suppose the apple price. Let's do $5, $8, $10, and then quantity will be 15, 20, and then 25. For banana, $4, $6, and $8. Quantity will be 20, 25, and 35. Just numbers, random numbers. Okay. All right. So we're gonna find out what is our nominal GDP. We're gonna find out what's our real GDP. We're gonna find out what's our deflator. We're gonna find out what's our inflation. All right, so for nominal GDP, let's do nominal GDP for 2015, nominal GDP for 2016, and nominal GDP for 2017. All right, so for nominal GDP for 2015, so again, remember GDP says is the gross domestic product. So gross means everything, right? So don't just find out just the value of one item, just one apple. Just find out the value of everything they produce in the economy. So all the apples and all the bananas. So for nominal GDP, I'm going to take the price of each year, so $5 for 2015, times the quantity of each year. Oh, too much. And then plus the price for banana times the quantity for banana. So that's your nominal GDP. Okay. Do the same thing for 2016. So $8 times 20. And then plus $6 times 25. So the price of each year times quantity of each year. Last one, 10 times 25 plus 8 times 35. So that's our nominal GDP. Now for real GDP, we're going to take the price of your base year, so $5, times each year quantity to get your real GDP. Okay, so I'm going to use the price of 2015 times each year quantity. So real GDP of 2015, real GDP of 2016, and then real GDP of 2017. All right, so this will be, so $5 times 15 plus $4 times 20. So just like before. Okay. So for the base year, will be the same thing, but for next year will be different. So for next year, again, we use our 2015 prices times our 2016 quantity. Okay. So again, 2015 prices times 2016 quantity. Now guys, when you do this, make sure be very careful, because if you just miss one number here, everything after that will be all wrong. Okay. There. Okay, so that's your real GDP for all 3 years. And the next one, deflator. A little more long. So for deflator, you'll do for all 3 years. So deflator for 2016 or 2015. Oh, show me back my spreadsheet. Deflator for 2015, deflator for 2016, deflator for 2017. All right, so for deflator, we're going to use our nominal GDP divided by real GDP times 100. So nominal GDP for 2015 is 155 divided by real GDP 155 times 100, and that's your deflator. Okay. Next year, so we're gonna do nominal 310 divided by real 200 times 100. And last one, I'm gonna do nominal 530 divided by real 265 times 100. That's your deflator for 2017. All right, last step, we're gonna find inflation. Now for inflations, we can only do it for 2016 and 2017. We cannot do the 2015 inflation. And the reason why, because to do 2015 inflation, we need to know what is our 2014 informations. Because for inflation, it's always between 2 years. So we don't know what 2014 is, so we cannot do 2015 inflation, okay? But let's do the one for 2016 and 2017. So it's always this year deflator minus last year divided by last year times 100%, so turn to percentage. So this year deflator is 155 minus last year 100 divided by last year 100 and times 100%. That's your percentage. Okay, that's your inflation. So I'm gonna format cell, turn to a percentage, and I always leave it 2 decimals. That's the safest way to do it. Okay, and then for 2017, we're gonna use our 2017 deflator minus 2015 deflator, and then divided by 2016 deflators, and divided by 2016 deflator, and turn that into a percentage. For my cell, percentage. So there. Okay, that's your inflation for 2 years. Okay, so guys, you need to know how to do this from the very first step. So how to do nominal GDP, real GDP, deflator, inflations. There'll be a question like this on the test. Okay, all right. So let's continue. Talk about this. All right. So as you can see, that every time there's a recession, GDP, real GDP goes down a little bit. Right, so that's why we tell you from the beginning that GDP is used as a measurement to see how good the economy is, and then every time GDP goes down, that's when we have a recession in the economy. And then the difference between a recession and depression, the recession is defined as 2 quarters of lower GDP, depression defined as 4 quarters of lower GDP. Okay, so for an entire year, GDP goes down, 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 down. That's called depression, but it's only for 6 months. That's called recession. Okay, so GDP is right now, it's not a perfect measurement for the economy, but right now it's the best measurement for the economy. Okay, so the higher the GDP is, that means the better the economy the country has. They might have better life, better healthcare, better education system. So that's why if you look at all the developed countries in the world, they all have very high GDP per person. However, GDP is not perfect. Okay, so GDP does not measure any leisure. That means if you do something like your hobby, make yourself happy, that's not a part of GDP. We don't measure that. So let's say if you go fishing, you enjoy fishing, that's good for you, right? But it's not part of GDP. You enjoy playing games, good for you, but that's not part of GDP. Okay, so GDP does not measure happiness. And then next, GDP does not measure all the activity taken outside the market. So any illegal activities is not in GDP. Anything happen at home is not GDP. And also GDP does not measure the quality of environment. Now, right now that's important for countries such as China and India. Now, those 2 countries have seen their GDP growing tremendously for the last 40 years, but their environment is destroyed in the process. Okay, so if you think your air quality is bad in America, in China, in India, you have no idea how bad it is over there. Okay, so that's a bad quality. Now last one is the GDP does not show you the income distribution. So just because you have a high GDP, it doesn't mean everybody is getting better off in the country. So let me give you an example. So suppose we have two people, person A. So person A and person B. So person A, let's suppose he made $1 million last year. Person B made nothing. Now if you look at the average income between the two, that's going to be $500,000. So if you're person B, do you feel pretty happy? Well, probably not, right? Because you made nothing. So just because you have a very high average income, it doesn't mean that everybody's better off in the country. So one thing GDP does not show you, it does not show you the equitable distribution of income in the country. Okay, so there might be a huge income gap. All right, I think that's it. Okay, so guys, that's it for this chapter. Have any question, let me know, and I will see you for next chapter. Okay, bye-bye.